Our guest today is Mr. Henry Cisneros, who has been a Latinx rising star since his very humble beginnings from the west side of San Antonio. He went on to be elected to city council as the youngest city councilman in San Antonio and was also elected as the first Mexican-American mayor of San Antonio since 1842. Among many other accolades, he was considered one of the top 10 mayors of the nation during his tenure and was then appointed as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Clinton. After leaving the political world, he worked as COO of Univision and has since made it his goal to bring affordable housing to the nation. Hi, Mr. Cisneros. My name is Dulce, and this is my dad, Javier Espinosa. We had the idea to start this podcast from conversations that I would have with my dad as I was growing up, going through school, trying to choose my life path, my career, what I wanted to do, and getting advice from him. And he would always tell me the importance of mentorship and how I was very lucky that I had parents that had already done this before me, because he and my mother growing up did not have that same opportunity. They didn't have that luxury of mentorship, of a Latinx person in a position of success or power that they could look up to, number one, and that they had access to be asking questions to and getting advice from. So the purpose of this podcast is to offer mentorship like that to everyone.
So, Mr. Cisneros, I want to tell you a quick story about why I insisted with my daughter that you be the first guest of our podcast. So, I was born in Juarez. My dad had a 9th grade education from Mexico. My mom had a 5th grade education from Mexico, both of them from little ranches, met in Juarez, and then got married, had my older brother and I. Moved to Odessa, Texas, West Texas, back in when I was 4 years old, which was very not friendly to Hispanics, shall we say, at that time. Growing up, I didn't speak any English. When I started kindergarten, went to school, always did well, but I had absolutely no plans on going to college. My dad worked in construction, my older brother worked in construction, I was gonna work in construction. So back around 1992, 93, I am sitting there in the living room watching TV with my dad. And this is funny because, I don't know why I'm choking up. But I see, we're watching TV and we see somebody on TV and it's the mayor of San Antonio and being considered for HUD secretary by the president. And I remember doing a double take and thinking like, this guy looks like me, he's brown, he's wearing a tie, he's articulate, he's educated, he's being considered by the president, he's a mayor. I didn't know you could do that. I had never seen anybody that looked like me in that position the way you did. And I tell you, and I think this is the first time you probably ever hear this, but you transformed my life, because it was at that point that I said, I don't want to be a construction worker. I want to go do something else. And so, so fast forward, going to UT Austin, living in my car, we didn't have any money, getting married, going to Lubbock, law school, El Paso. So I saw you around 1992, 93 on TV. I went through all that life, right? El Paso, and then we moved to San Antonio in 2007, my wife at the time and I. And I'm thinking, this is where Henry Cisneros is from. I can make it here. Yeah. And so a good friend of mine, Jorge Herrera, invites me to the stables at the Pearl to a luncheon. And I go, and now we're talking 2007. I go to the Pearl, and I'm sitting there at the luncheon, and I think, I got to go to the restroom. So I go to the restroom, and I'm standing there at the stall in the restroom. Door opens, and guess who walks in? It was you, and I'm like, do I tell him anything? Do I talk to him? And you came and you stood at the stall next to me, and the entire time I'm thinking, this is gonna be so awkward if I tell him what he's meant to me, why I'm here. Yeah. And man, I froze. And you went, washed your hands, and you left, and I never got the chance to thank you or talk to you. So now,
what a great story, and I'm grateful you told me now.
And not then.
Yeah.
But having said that, there's a lot of kids. We opted to do this video podcast because there's a lot of kids that were in my situation. I didn't have access to an attorney, to a politician, to a successful person that looked like me, had gone through my experiences. And so, can we talk a little bit about your life and kind of your schooling and what made you decide to bring?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for doing the podcast and congratulate you on your career. You've had a very successful career, and it's wonderful for young people to see what you have done in your practice of law and the background from which you've come to the practice of law and the setting in which you live now and the way you've raised your family. And so congratulations on all of that. And thank you for your attributing to me some role in your goal setting. And congratulations to you on your education, your work, your plans going forward for your own education, which is a great story. This is a very good idea, and it's wonderful to see a father-daughter team working on this. And you are fortunate to have mother and father who both set goals early and expectations early, and you're living it out. And there's no greater fulfillment for parents than to see children who are walking that path. I grew up in San Antonio. My mother was from Mexico, grew up in Puebla, came as a very little girl, and lived on the west side in San Antonio. Her father was a printer who was very successful in establishing his own print shop, so they were active. He had been active in the politics of Mexico and continued his activism for the community, along with my grandmother, on the west side. My father grew up in Colorado and New Mexico in a ranch environment, farm environment, until he was drafted for World War II, and then spent almost 4 years in the Pacific and fighting in combat, literally in combat most of the time. He was stricken with malaria, and they sent him here to San Antonio to recover at Randolph Field. And it's that way, through my mother's brother, that they met, married, and grew up, lived their lives on the west side. We lived in the same house on Monterrey Street on the west side our entire lives.
And my understanding, you still live in the west side, right?
I do. I live in my grandparents' home and still own my parents' home, which we rent to a sister from Our Lady of the Lake.
Wow.
So my whole life has revolved around the culture of the Mexican-American community, the Mexicano community of San Antonio. I went to Catholic grade school and also high school, Central Catholic High School, before going to Texas A&M, where I was in the Corps of Cadets.
What year would that have been
unit.
in?
I'm a graduate in 1968 from A&M. But it was a great experience for me because growing up on the west side, I really didn't have a perspective for the entirety of the state or the country. And A&M in those days was the kind of place where if you perform well on merit, you can be recognized and succeed. I was a commander of a Corps unit my year. There was people that I admired, Mexicanos from San Angelo, ahead of me. And the year after me, the commander of the entire Corps of Cadets was a man named Hector Gutierrez from Laredo. So there were Mexicanos, few. But if you could perform on the drill field and perform in the athletic field, perform in the classroom, and demonstrate leadership, there was no barrier.
And it's my understanding that your parents did a really good job about teaching you the value of hard work and education throughout your childhood.
My father was a reader, always. Even when he was in the war, he was reading 3 books at a time. They used to tease him when he was a soldier in combat, reading books at night.
Wow.
And my mother, actually, very few people know this, she graduated from Jefferson High School. My grandfather wanted her to go to the best high school that was possible in those days, and that was Jefferson on the northwest side, one of only like 2 or 3 Mexicanas in her graduating class in 1942, and she went to the University of Texas.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
For a semester, because the war broke out and they needed her to come back and work because all the boys were going to the war to help my grandfather in the print shop. But a Mexicana at the University of Texas
Back
in
in those
1942.
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I think a lot of our viewers probably experience is how, I imagine when you went to A&M initially, right, you were probably walking into a room where you were probably one of very few brown people.
Yeah, and hazed and harassed.
And probably not wanted there by some people.
Well, yeah, probably. But, as I say, luckily it was a setting very much like the military, where if you perform on the merits, you make it. And I've been fortunate to live in settings where that was the ethic. But the principal good fortune in my life is to have parents who set high expectations early. And I would say to parents who may watch this podcast that it is essential to set an expectation of achievement, of education, of college. Just set the norm. You're going to college early and have to do whatever it takes to prepare educationally. But more importantly, you are going to college, whatever form it takes, whether it's the community college or whether it's a public higher education or whether it's the Ivy League private schools, whatever, but you are going to college. So that's a given. That's a given. We're just going to assume that you're going to college.
How do you set that for yourself, for kids that may be listening right now? You went on and got your master's at A&M, your PhD from George Washington University. You went to Harvard and got a master's in Harvard. You're very educated. That doesn't necessarily come from a parent telling you go. At some point, you have to absorb that for yourself and set high expectations for yourself. How do you do that? How do kids do that for themselves?
And maintain that motivation when it gets very tough.
Well, that's a good question. Nobody has ever asked me that question before. I think it starts with viewing the world and recognizing that the world is not going to give us anything, that we have to go and fight for it. And if we're going to fight for it, we may as well fight for the highest levels. So when I learned during the years that I was at A&M of the respect that was accorded people who went to Harvard, it stuck in my mind. If you're going to fight, then fight for the top, fight for the best, try to achieve the most that you can. And I went to the Kennedy School, the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. Embedded in my mind was President Kennedy and what he meant for government, for our country. And so I read a lot of biography. I read biography to learn history. Learning history in rote fashion, decade after decade, is a little dry. Right. But learning people's stories, and when you read enough history, you realize that there are high standards if you're going to achieve at the highest levels. You have to educate yourself. I've said to people frequently, we know the Latino community is going to be large in the future. We know that. And I'm very proud of my Mexicano heritage, my Hispanic heritage. My grandfather, my parents imbued that in us, right? From folkloric dance to living in the neighborhood among other Latinos, to going to church, to being in the Boy Scouts. It was all brown faces, all brown faces. And I lived in a neighborhood where all the men were returnees from World War II. Right. And they were working at Kelly Air Force Base or Fort Sam Houston or Lackland, all in civil service. And I guess at the war, during the war, they had absorbed a sense of patriotism, and they wanted their kids to advance. And our neighborhood did very well. Down the street from me, Jesse Trevino, the artist, okay, 2 blocks away. Next block after that, Alex Briseño, who became the longest serving city manager in the history of our city. A few blocks from there, Ricardo Romo, who became the president of UTSA. 1 street over, Leonel Sosa, who created the largest advertising firm, Mexicanizing advertising firm in the country. So some sense of ambition was imbued in the neighborhood. And frankly, we did not accept discrimination. It may have existed, but we didn't accept it in the sense of, well, there's a ceiling. There's a stopping point for us because we're Mexicano. No. So, that's not what we believed in the neighborhood. We were just as good as anybody else.
So you're saying you didn't internalize that?
Correct.
Because while it still existed outside and might have had...
we were in a cocoon. Yeah.
Well, outside your cocoon.
I tell people they let us grow in the cocoon to the point that when we were ready to leave it, we could compete.
Well, let me ask you this. I was raised in the opposite, right? I was raised in Odessa, Texas, where I had honors English, I remember. And I remember being the only Hispanic in my class. They were all Anglo. And I remember coming back from spring break, and what did you do for spring break? Oh, we went to Europe. What did you do for spring break? Oh, and then I was like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed to tell the teacher that I worked in construction with my dad all week. Yeah. And so I imagine that at some point when you were a White House fellow in 1971, or when you went to MIT or were invited to teach, I imagine that when at some point when you became HUD secretary, that you walked into a room where you may have felt maybe a sense of what they call imposter syndrome. You know, like, man, do I really belong here? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
I'll tell you.
Or you just always known you were the best.
I certainly did experience that because I was not the best. Even I graduated at 16 because I had skipped a grade in elementary school. So obviously, I guess the teachers thought I was smart enough to skip a grade, but they didn't do me a favor because I was the youngest in my group. And I was always a little behind in the sense of other guys were driving, other guys were dating, other guys were, living the good life athletically, and I was just smaller and had to fight my way through. A&M was very important to me because there I got the sense that you set a goal, you work hard. I mean, like primitive hard, right? Like push yourself to the core of you didn't know existed inside you, and you can do it. Mm-hmm. But only if you work that hard.
So you got to have the discipline.
If you push that hard.
You have to have the discipline.
You have to have the discipline and the stamina, the staying power, and the goal, So I guess maybe when you push me to think about what was the moment of awareness for me, it was that. The biggest thing that's ever happened to me in my life was getting elected mayor of San Antonio. I had been a council member for 6 years, and it was a successful 6-year run because the city needed somebody to sort of wake it up in terms of things that were wrong for our community.
And just for reference, for some people that are watching, that was 1975 to 81, right?
Correct.
City
Correct.
Council.
You're good. You've studied. So I fought for lower utility rates, and I fought for better prices for our water system for residents. I didn't know I had it in me to fight for the community in that way, but the community liked it. And there was a lot of encouragement to run for mayor. In 1981, I was 33 years old. That would have made me the youngest mayor in the city's history, the first Mexicano since Juan Seguin.
1842.
1842. Right? So I ended up running for mayor, and lo and behold, won. Now you're in it, man. You asked for this, now you got it.
You jumped in the deep side of the pool.
You're in the deep water.
So that may be what a young kid feels, that maybe is the first one to ever go outside of their city to college. They go off to Kansas, UT, whatever, Minnesota, and they've jumped into that deep water.
Yeah.
And that's what you felt when you
But there's a
became
moment of awareness when you have to stop thinking about your fear, thinking about your inadequacy, and you're in it now. The only other time I had that sensation was my son, for my birthday a few years ago, gave me a gift, surprised the heck out of me. I didn't know where we were going. We were driving out in the country, and we drove to an airport because he was going to treat me to skydiving.
Oh, wow. How long ago was this?
About 5 years ago.
Oh, my God.
So
don't even
he
think
and I
about
are
it.
together. No, this was not a gift I was
You
happy
wanted?
about, but we're there now. And unless I'm going to be a complete and total chicken in the eyes of my son,
Exactly.
So we get up in the plane and we're way up there, and they urge you to the window, and you have a guy attached to you. It's a tandem jump, and all of a sudden there's you look out the window and there's the ground way down below, and it's like, okay, this is it. Let's go. Let's do it. Bow.
So you know what? That brings me to one of my questions, because I did that too. I just went skydiving because I have a major fear of heights.
Yeah.
And I had just graduated from college.
That's a great way to heal it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that, but I do remember thinking I struggle with anxiety. I never want to let my fear or my anxiety control or dictate my actions in life. So I have wanted to go skydiving since I was young, and I decided just this fear of heights is not going to stop me from doing that.
Right.
However, it did make me think about how in life, as you're going through your path to success, there are so many times where a situation or an instance feels insurmountable.
Right.
I'm not going to get past this.
You just
I
have
can't
to do
this.
You just have to do it. And I've had that sensation many times. I'm backstage to a large and intimidating audience, might be scholarly Harvard-type audience, and I'm like 2 minutes away from going out there, not sure about what I have to say or deliver, but knowing that they're going to be very critical in their analysis. Okay, this is it. Walk out there, the lights are on, look out at the audience, they're there.
Jump out of the plane. You jump out of the plane.
It's like
right?
jumping out of the plane, right? So you just have to do it.
Okay.
And I think that has many, as you say, analogs in life for young people.
Yes.
You may be the first one at the University of Kansas, or you may be the first one in the law program at Chicago University, University of Chicago, or you may be the first one elected to the law review at UCLA, or you may be the first one to serve as president of the student council at your school from your heritage. You just have to do it. You just have to do it. And it's amazing when Winston Churchill said something once about when you act with boldness, it is as all the forces of providence align behind you. You suddenly, all of your natural energies and all of your spiritual help is with you.
No, but I think the lesson also that maybe some viewers should get from that is you don't just jump out of the plane without somebody that knows what they're doing, without a parachute, without preparation.
No, that's true.
Right? If you are going to be the first one, you have to be prepared, right? And that's the thing that I think a lot of kids, when they ask me, what do you advise? I said, look, I have seen that successful people are not the smartest and not even always the hardest working, but they're the ones that are disciplined, that have that drive, but that discipline to get up every morning. That discipline, if you say, well, I'm not as smart as my other people, then get up an hour earlier and read more. Get up an hour and study.
You know what I've said about that is the Mexicano community, as I was saying earlier, is going to be large, right? We know that. But is it going to be large and prepared and productive and a powerful contributor to the success of the country? Or is it going to be large but undereducated, underproductive, where other people see us as a drag on the future? I think we can be the former, right? But they're not going to change the rules for us and suddenly make it easy for us to get a degree or an education or succeed in our work. The rules are not going to change. The rules that have always applied in this country exist. Hard work, focus, discipline. You just can't have a life of, fun and wasted time and then expect to get the honors and the leadership. I mean, in your law practice, not only have you prepared educationally, but you got to prepare for every case. The opponent wants to beat you that time, and there's people's lives are at stake and money's at stake, and you must feel pressure every time you go into litigation.
I tell kids, when my kids were little and we were practicing, I opened up my own practice. I gave up TV. Like, I could not go home and watch TV and be a dad and study and work hard and do, there's things that have to give, right? And so for me, the discipline was give up TV, go home, play with my kids, put them, put them to bed, get my laptop out, work another 2 hours.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I would say on that score is I don't think we can dictate what every young Latino child should be.
Right.
Because everybody has different interests and different skills. So it's important. Part of the process of being good is knowing what you would be good at, knowing what appeals to you, knowing what you like, knowing, what's that famous saying? If you love what you do, it's not work. It's what you love to do. So you're willing to put in the hours, you're willing to put in the time, you're willing to get it right. And so that's important, to have some self-knowledge. Like, I'm good at, some students will say, I'm artistic. I'm good at artistic things. I'm good with people. I like dealing with people. I like more introverted study and research. That's what I'm good at. Well, let's find out what it is, because when you know that and then you match up your educational commitment, your educational direction with that, you're going to be good at it.
What comes more naturally to you, right?
Exactly. And you're probably good at standing before people and persuading them on a point of law and doing the research that precedes it.
That's come very naturally to me. Sure. But my passion was art. I wanted to be an artist growing up, and I tell people I followed what came naturally to me, and that gave me the means to now collect art and do what I love, what my real passion is.
Have you tried art?
I did.
He's a very good artist. He is. He's
I just
very
don't have
good
time because I had 3 kids.
But I do have a question for you because I think looking at life from my position where I still have all of my life ahead of me and I still have all of these opportunities in front of me and choices to make,
Right.
what can you say concretely that you had to give up to be where you are now? Because
Well,
that's
I've had to give up a lot of things.
I understand that now.
I have a pretty tight sense of what I have to do. I don't want to be immodest, but I think if I were to assess what am I best at, it's bringing people together, finding the common ground, doing the homework that helps people understand that common ground. Sometimes it has to be done graphically, sometimes it's an explanation, etc. But that's what I do, and that's what I've done in politics, that's what I've done in business, that's what's fed the success that I have. And finding the words, by the way, through extensive reading and vocabulary and so forth, to get it right for people, okay? So that's what I do, and I try to support life. I work out every day because I have to be strong to do that, right? I don't spend a lot of time in like vacations and such because my work requires a constant improvement. I take home homework every night, and it ends up being about 2 hours worth of reading and broadening my own understanding of the field that I'm in, which is investing in infrastructure, right? But I have this belief that if you build your life around what you're trying to do, you can do almost anything. So giving up. I mean, my friends used to call me and say, "Would you like to play golf?" Well, I played some golf in college, intramural. But when I was mayor, they'd go out at 7 o'clock in the morning to play golf, and they'd be out until 2 o'clock in the afternoon when they sat down to have a beer because they were hot because they'd been playing golf the whole day. And in that time, I had presided over the opening of a library, met with a group of constituents who wanted to talk about neighborhood problems, done one interview with the press. That was my job. That's what I had to do, and give up that recreation that my friends were enjoying. I don't know how to play golf now.
So you had to give up a lot of that personal leisure time,
Exactly.
which maybe a lot of young kids would relate to it by saying, give up some of that Netflix time, right? Like stop watching
Games.
so much Netflix. Yeah,
Video games.
and read, study, prepare yourself, because that's what it takes a lot of times is giving up that leisure time that we obviously we would all enjoy. Having fun and enjoying ourselves that way, but it goes back to that discipline.
Yeah, and it goes to other things as well. I mean, if your idea of a fun night is to go out and get drunk as a student, as a kid, maybe even dabble with some of the drugs that are offered, recreational drugs, then you're simply not going to achieve your maximum. You're not, because your body can only do so much. And if you waste it on that kind of activity, then forget it. You've just taken a piece of your brain and hurt it. So, as I say, the key phrase here is they're not going to change the basic rules of human nature or American success for us. We're going to have to adapt ourselves to some of the elements of the system and work hard at it.
So I just want to clarify and get your opinion as somebody, both of y'all's opinions actually, as people who have succeeded. When you're saying, don't give up your Netflix time or don't go out and drink as a student or, give up these things that kind of make life enjoyable.
I didn't say don't drink, I said don't get drunk.
Don't get drunk. Okay, so don't get drunk.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was like, because you see that little cart back there.
So when you're saying that, are you saying give it up completely, or are you saying, scale back, make sure that you are prioritizing?
No, I think you have to have balance in life, okay?
Great, that's what I wanted to.
You have to have balance in life. And the balance, for example, for me, comes from several things. One, try to enjoy family time. I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren, and we try to take trips during the course of the year, which is important for family. That's the balance of family. I think spirituality is very important, and I have, been a person who goes to church every Sunday, and that's I used to think it was a chore, and now it's like I look forward to it because it's time to absorb, the larger lessons of life. And it's been pretty amazing in my later years to, sort of come home to some sense of spirituality of the church. So those are all balancing things to create balance in life. My favorite thing, I have two things that really bring me peace. My favorite time of the day is at the end of the day, the last 40 minutes or so, I'm reading something that is totally unrelated to my work. And I notice you're a reader, you have some excellent books up there of history, biography, and so forth. Those are, to me, that's a very important time. I'm reading right now a book on, I didn't think I would like it, and I didn't respect him, and that is Elon Musk and Tesla. My goodness, what a determination there is, and what an amazing thing to start a whole new car industry, electric cars, right? So I've learned something from it, and I spend 45 minutes at night reading 20 pages or so. That means I get through a book sort of slowly, but that's a great balance for me. And also I love classical music, so when I'm sitting in my study working those 2 hours of homework, I have classical music, and it brings me great peace somehow. I don't know the full reason, but those things bring balance to life.
Let me ask you this, because I notice, I've noticed people that are successful go two routes, right? And when I say successful, I mean financially successful. There's those that go financially successful and go to an extreme. They're driving the Lamborghinis, they want the yacht, they want all these fancy things. And then there's others that they don't derive pleasure from so much. Obviously, we all like good things and we like nice things, but you have a Casio watch on, I believe.
$49.
$49 watch, and I know you've been financially successful. So how do you tell kids, look? Because some of these kids may be thinking, I'm working hard because I want to have the nice car, I want the Mercedes, I want the nice house. How do you, or when did you get to the point where you're like, that's not really where I'm finding satisfaction?
It's a good point. I've heard a saying that says, boys like big toys, but they're still boys, So the boat, the house at the lake, the sports car, etc. I don't think that's what life is about. I like another phrase better, which is you can do well and do good. Yeah. So you can make a difference with your life and touch other people's lives and make things better and still do well. Not filthy wealthy, but well. Where you have all the comforts that you possibly need, or that are justifiable. Now, I live in my grandparents' old home. I could live anywhere in the city. I love Monte Vista. I love King William, but we live on the west side in what is called the poorest census tract in the city. Okay, and we live in my grandparents' old home, which we've refurbished several times. We have all the comforts we could possibly want, in terms of what you need on a daily basis, but it's certainly not anybody's idea of ostentatious or a status home. So that's just me. I don't know why exactly I feel that way. Luckily, I'm married to Mary Alice, who kind of feels the same way. She grew up in the neighborhood, and she's fine to live in the neighborhood. Never has pressed me and said, if you don't get me a house in the Dominion, we're done. That's not happened.
But even after all your success, you're known for trying to bring affordable housing, right, to middle class America. You've always given back. I've noticed that about your career, which is you could have taken two paths. Use your pulpit to say, I want to go make as much money as I can. I want to live the best life I want for me. But you've kind of chosen, like you're saying, you've done well, but a lot of your life has been focused on giving back. Why?
That was a conscious choice to choose things to work on that are going to generate what you need in income and so forth, but that touch lives. So when I left the cabinet, I went to Univision, did that, Univision, for 4 years, but that really wasn't me. So I picked a field where what I had learned before as mayor and as HUD secretary I could do and still make money. And that was affordable housing. So we built a company, which is still very active in California, to build, quote, workforce housing. That's not upscale. That's not subsidized poverty housing. It's for working people, right? And it's done very well. Company's done well. We've done well. But we've built, like $5 billion worth of housing for people across the country. Now I'm in a field where we're raising capital to invest in infrastructure. We just had the groundbreaking for Terminal 6 at JFK Airport, where we're an investor in that terminal, right? And we're working on a rail system in Los Angeles, and we're working on a cargo airport at Laredo. So again, I feel good about what we're doing. We're making a contribution to the advancement of the country, but in the process, making some money that allows my son to be involved in the business. We have an office in New York, in the Chrysler Building, et cetera. So that's conscious choice. I could have done other things. Those were conscious choices. And it allows me every morning when I'm shaving and looking in the mirror to know I'm not wasting my time. I'm actually moving the ball forward for the country. And yet, I've got to make a living as a private person.
So I have a lot of young law students say, I want to go into the nonprofit sector. I want to help here, this nonprofit. And in my speech, I guess, to them is always, look, that is amazing. That's great. But understand, if you go into the nonprofit sector, it's very unlikely that you're going to be driving a Mercedes. It's very unlikely you're going to have this big house in this big fancy area. And that's okay, but go into it eyes wide open, right? What would you tell those kids that kind of are having to make a choice? They're kind of saying, look, this is what I want to do, but it's not going to give me the financial return that I would like.
I've faced those decisions, and there certainly are professions where you can help people and do comfortably well. You're going to have all that you need. A professor in an academic setting might become the president of the university, for example, or people in the nonprofit sector working in things like Habitat for Humanity and others. Their executives get paid a reasonable salary. You're right, they're not going to have the latest Mercedes, but they're going to have a nice home. And not everybody needs the ultimate. I mean, the definition of success should not be all the wealth you're able to accumulate. That is not the definition of a contributing life.
What is the definition of success to you? Like somebody listening to you right now, what is the definition of success to you in somebody's life?
Well, that's a deep philosophical question. But I would say if at the end of your life, you can say, I made the world better because I was here. I made some kind of contribution to other people or to the progress of humankind as we know it, then you would have had a successful life. If you can say, I think at the end of a lifetime, I lived by the words of the Lord's Prayer, where the Lord says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If you can make the earth somewhat more near like our spiritual goals, and every day of your life is spent somehow doing that, that would be a successful life. So some people will have a very successful life by that definition and never have any money because they might be a priest or they might be a social worker or might work with the homeless, right? But those are noble lives.
Well, they may have 3 kids that are very expensive.
Or I mean, you're touching people's lives in your work. People come to you with a moment of distress because they were in an accident at their work, right? And you help them at that moment. That to me, that meets the definition of helping people have a better life.
So the advice that you're giving young people right now is that if your number one indicator of success is wealth, you have to have a mind shift. And not that you have to necessarily, but if you want to do good for the world, correct, then a mind shift is necessary.
Yeah, because what happens is if you stay on that first course and money is your objective, you'll probably never change. Mm-hmm. Because human nature, you get spoiled chasing those things and you can never make the shift. You've locked yourself into a way of life with obligations and debts and you can never make the shift. Now you're a slave to amassing more money.
And you'll never make enough, right?
And you'll never make enough. And you'll never be the richest person, but there's always going to be, someone who's done more and had a great good fortune and built something. So that's not the competition. That's not the race you want to be in. Right. I think the race you want to be in is more measured, more balanced, more understanding how that the greater test is, did you do something good for somebody, for people, for the country, make it better?
So maybe.
And by the way, our world is in really serious shape between global warming and migrations that are going to be massive, and contentiousness at the international level, and the infectious diseases run rampant, et cetera. We need our best working on saving this place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So one of the things we kind of talked to a lot of young women at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. We did a focus group on one that wanted to hear, and we also did with Hispanic law students at St. Mary's Law School. And one of the questions that they asked that I kind of started here because I thought it was very interesting, because a lot of these kids, I specifically asked that I wanted to focus group with kids that were first kids in their families to go to college, low socioeconomic. And so they walk in, and this is what they wanted to know from you. They said, how do you continue being your authentic self while still being respected when we're not necessarily being what this space is looking for? And so the way they explained that to me is, one of them said, look, I come from a culture of whatever, cowboy hats and the ranch, and my dad's this, or my construction worker, we laugh, we joke, we're not educated. But all of a sudden, I've got to step into a room where I'm wearing a business suit. I have to speak very properly. I have to know how to eat and know all this etiquette. That is not me. And they tell me, I feel like a hypocrite. I feel like that's not me. And so they were asking, how do you walk into that space and still feel authentic without feeling like you sold out your family?
Well, that's a very, very hard. It's a good question. It's a very hard question. And it's one that confronts many Latinos, many people of our heritage. Although I will say, our people, in my view, have a better sense of not leaving their heritage than most Americans. Our ties are strong, our roots are strong, our families are strong, our ties to the neighborhood, to the religion, et cetera, are strong. And so I'm very proud that, by and large, most Mexicanos that I run into who have made it, they're the president of a university, or they're the head of a law firm, or they're the head of a bank. They haven't forgotten their roots. They still have a little part of them in their conscience that wants to help the community. So I think, that's important to remember that. Let your heritage be your roots. Right. That nurtures you through lifetime. But I get the point you're making, and I would say I've had to deal with a lot of that. I think the thing is, you don't have to lose who you are because of the way the country is changing, and it is recognizing more diversity and celebrating more diversity. So what you bring is actually a contribution. It's actually a different way of thinking, and it adds to the richness, and more American institutions are understanding that. So you don't have to change the essence of who you are, but try to make a positive contribution, and you'll be judged on that.
And would you say that who you are evolves? Obviously, you've had a great many accomplishments in your career. Obviously, the Henry Cisneros of today is not the Henry Cisneros of 27 when you got onto the city council. 81 when you were governor.
Mayor.
Yeah, I'm sorry, mayor. Yeah. Should have been governor. Very disappointed in you. But we change, we evolve, right? Who we are at 30 is not who we were at 20. Yeah. That doesn't mean that.
But what's important to us at different times changes. Right. But I would say the country is changing. Yeah. So somebody who comes in and says, "Look, I'm not going to even concede that I have to change my appearance or demeanor because somebody else expects something different of me," is still valued for their uniqueness, for their heritage, for the contribution they can make, for the different viewpoint they make, and what they're going to be judged on is how smart is their contribution, how valuable is it to
What do you bring to the table?
What do you bring to the table? Exactly. What do you bring to the table? And I think your generation is fortunate that they're coming into a world where those things are more recognized. We have to keep it that way because there's a lot of forces who are trying to roll back the clock.
Yes, no, I agree, and I think what you're talking about is another mind shift of your culture and who you are. You don't have to give that up.
Correct.
You what you have to give up is that shame that has been
Correct.
drilled into you
Or let it be
by
any
society.
kind of a reason for hesitancy or
Yes.
holding back. Just boldly put out there what you got.
Yes, there is no reason to be ashamed of your culture, of who you are, of where you came from.
And even in a conservative settings, people respect what you've got to say.
Yes.
And we'll listen to it nowadays, right? And if you say it well, and you say it thought out, and you say it with good intentions and goodwill, you got a shot.
And that goes back to being prepared.
It goes back to being prepared, being thoughtful, and organizing your thoughts in such a way that they're coherent.
Yeah. Now, being prepared, going back to being prepared, one of the things that I have experienced when I talk to young kids is when we say there's a lack of mentorship, I'm talking about there's a lack of mentorship even of what you talked about. Hey, go to the gym, exercise, eat healthy, don't stay up till 2:00 in the morning watching movies, playing games. Like, just what are some good life habits that, let's say Henry Cisneros was the dad of whoever's watching here right now, right? What life habits would you tell them? Look, mija, this is what you've got to do in life.
Well, those are good questions. I would say, I'd say work out so you're physically fit, so you can stay healthy, so you have the stamina to do the long hours that are required.
And whatever that is, right? Yoga,
Whatever it is.
gym, whatever
it is. But it has positive physical effects. It releases endorphins. Most people feel better after they've worked out, right? It keeps you healthy, gives you stamina, and actually the confidence bleeds over into your other work, right? You just feel a more wholesome person. So that's one thing I would say. The other, stay curious and open. Learn to learn. Not just learn the material, but learn how to learn, because you're going to have to be learning more for your entire life. Things are going to change, and you need to be broad gauged and read a whole different range of things and push yourself to things that are uncomfortable. Not just pleasure reading, but read more about things that you don't understand, like the economy, okay? Or like some science, or like something about where we're going with the climate or space or whatever. But broad, right?
Now, some people may say, I don't like, I have a hard time reading. Would you recommend? Well, then watch documentaries, YouTube. There's all podcasts. Listen to a podcast.
Absolutely. There are new
Audiobooks.
mediums for educating ourselves, but the key is to stay intellectually curious, intellectually active for a lifetime.
Yes.
Okay? And you have to prepare yourself for that. I would say nurture strong family relationships, as the two of you so obviously have, across generations, and also friendships. Real friendships that satisfy the soul.
So do you think, as kids are listening to this, right? That's the first question I always ask kids when they're like, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, and I'm going to be the first. Well, I ask them, well, who are you hanging out with? Who are you speaking with? Because if the other 5 friends you have would prefer to go party Friday night than going to the library, at some point you're probably going to give in. Yeah. You probably need to start hanging out with the guys or the girls that go to the library on Friday night and have that influence.
Well, you raised a very good, additional point there, and as long as we're in this mode of, sort of giving kids advice, I've tried to make a couple of points. Be careful who your friends are, but very importantly, be careful who you're going to live your life with. The most important decision we make it usually in our early 20s or so, is who we're going to marry. Because
My early 30s now.
Okay.
Don't rush me.
you're right. My son is 35 and he's not married.
Yeah.
She has no desire.
Don't put that on me.
I mean, so many people I have seen careers crash because they're just not aligned.
Yeah.
And that could be a really, really, so choose carefully. It's not always the prettiest or the, external factors, the most charming, the wittiest. It's who's got the heart and soul to ride with you,
Yeah.
the long ride.
And so we keep talking about the people around us, our friends, our partners, our family members. I would like to know, how did your path to success, every choice you made, all this hard work, this determination, how did that affect the people in your life?
Well, unfortunately, it does. And if you are, and I hate to use these words, but if you're the driver, the alpha in the relationship, then by definition, other people come along for the ride. Now you could say, well, if you're not in for the ride, then leave me, okay? But that's not the way life is. People
Do with family members.
exactly. People sign on. So I'm sure my daughters were impacted by the political life that I lived in the early years. I wasn't home all the time. My wife spent a lot of time raising them. I wasn't home. I'd tried very hard, never miss a recital, never miss a athletic contest, but I worked at it. But they didn't have a normal growing up as children. In fact, my daughter spent a lot of time at community events, sitting on the front row of a community event, watching their father speak, or watching a talent show that we attended together, a city recreation department function. Now, in retrospect, later in life, they've turned out to be good citizens and good leaders, right? Which I think came from that. But I'm sure there was time when they would have said, I want to go play at my cousin's house, not sit with you at this public event.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you ever think about that kind of how that was affecting the people around you as you were making those decisions?
Probably not, because I was too driven, too ambitious, too focused on the goal, and I just assumed, look, this is important. It's bigger than me, and you should see that, and come along.
Any regrets now that you're kind of, where you're at?
No, I don't think so, because I gave it all I had, and I had to. Yeah. If I hadn't given it everything I had, it wouldn't have worked. As council member, as mayor, as secretary, I poured everything I had into it. And I think they can see that that's what it took. And they can see that there was some benefit to the family from that. I've built most of my life, frankly, on the basis of those things that I did early in life. And if I hadn't given it everything I had early in life, then the whole system wouldn't have worked.
So it was a sacrifice you made, knowing that kind of the whole family had to sacrifice.
Correct.
There was a young woman that's a single mom in law school, and she's got a little girl, and she is at the top of her class doing really well, and she struggles with that a lot.
Yeah.
She says, I fear that my daughter, I don't see her enough, she's going to resent me, all these issues.
Well, that's why it takes a village. I mean, I have a similar situation. We bring students into I have a private library as part of our building. You'll have to come and see it. And one of the things we do is we ask the counselors from the neighborhood schools, high schools, to send us students who want to go to college, but they don't know anything about it. Or they haven't even thought about it, and they're juniors already. And we bring them in and sort of do them a crash course on, this is what college is about, these are the options, this is how you finance it, etc. And we have one young girl who is a single mom, went through the community college, ready to go to 4 years. She couldn't make it unless her mother took care of her little girl. She couldn't make it unless her mother and father, and every afternoon she goes and picks up the little girl, but that's where she goes after school. There's a lot of family situations like that now.
So have your village.
It takes a village. It takes a village. And I know in my case, it took a village. I had 2 daughters in those days, and Mary Alice was expected to be along with me on a lot of the public things that I did. Her sisters jumped in. My daughters grew up almost as daughters of my sisters-in-law and my brothers and sisters. But they were very happy. They never bothered them. They enjoyed life. But it takes a larger community.
And
that's why I say never,
right?
never leave. Talking to the young people watching this podcast, never leave your family nest because you can need it.
Yes. I think also we do have to recognize that a lot of these kids might not have a supportive family. So find that support system.
Yeah.
Find that support
friends.
system.
It could be friends.
Yes, your chosen family if you have to, but that
Correct.
is what's important. And I will say I can't speak for your kids, but I know growing up with my parents, they were working all the time. I had to attend a lot of community events. I had to be there as well, block walking, phone banking. And Dad wasn't home all the time, or Dad was the only one home, and so. I think I have heard a lot too, that fear from a lot of parents that my kids are going to resent me, I'm not home enough. I will say from my perspective, the value that I got out of watching my parents put everything they had into their work
Has made
and
you
their
the person
success.
that you are.
Exactly.
Which is a pretty admirable result.
Yes, and yes, thank you.
She's about to start her PhD program at A&M, by the way. So they're like, who is that little girl? What does she bring to the table?
No, but I will say, yes, I don't find myself resenting my parents, and I don't find myself wishing that anything else was different. I spent a lot of time with my family, and it was great. It was very valuable to see that hard work and determination.
Kids are resilient, right? And kids are going to
Yes.
emulate what they see.
Yes, exactly.
So I don't want to take up a whole lot more of your time, but I want to make sure that I recap kind of the life advice that young kids take away. You specified number one is your health, work out, do something for your health. Number two was read, stay intellectually curious. Maybe not necessarily read, but stay intellectually curious, learn, do everything you can. Family and friends, create that
Balance.
village, that balance with your family and friends. And lastly, we're going to have different people on the podcast. We may have judges, we may have engineers. I'm hoping to get an astronaut someday. I consider you a role model a lot in the political business world, right? So if you've got somebody, maybe the future president, the first Latina president of the United States, or the first Latino president of the United States, what, in addition to those three life advice, would you give them that's a little more specific maybe to the political world if somebody's thinking about going into politics? What other advice, especially in the world of social media?
I'll get to that, but let me just add to my list there, because I think I might have missed it. You have to be technically competent. So whatever you choose to do, make the most of your rigorous education. You may not be number one in your class, but try to be. And focus hard on the material you're supposed to know, because you're going to need to know it, and you cannot be a charlatan and fake your way, right? So whether it comes early or whether it comes later, learn what you need to learn. You went to law school. I presume you studied hard and worked hard, and now you're riding on the crest of the knowledge base that began at that point. You've learned a lot in your practice and in subsequent education. But I would say, again, they're not going to change the rules of expecting excellence and competence for us just because we're large and we've arrived as a population. It's still going to, in fact, it's going to be harder because the problems of the world are more complex. And the way we're going to be judged in the future is, as leaders, are we making a difference in these really, really knotty, hard problems? And to do that, you need all the education, all the excellence you can amass, right? So specifically with respect to politics, I think politics is a business where you have to love people and love their stories and belief in the progress of humankind and want to help people move forward, right? So I'm reluctant to give people advice along the lines of work in a campaign, learn, sort of political rhetoric. All those things are useful, but the key is determine whether you're a person who likes people and wants their well-being to progress, right? It's very hard to be in politics and not be a person who likes people, right? But they exist because they have other goals. I want to advance to the next office. I want to be in the limelight. I like my face on a billboard. I love what I look like on television, etc. Okay? But it eventually shows through if you don't really like being with people, because the art of politics is people. I will tell you this. When I was mayor, I worked myself during the week to exhaustion. And I remember one Friday night, I was thinking in my mind that I had a free day the next day with not having to interface with anybody, and I was looking forward to it. At around 6 o'clock, my secretary came in with my schedule for Saturday. And I looked at it, and my jaw dropped. Started with an 8 o'clock appointment, an 11 o'clock appointment, a luncheon, a meeting in the afternoon, and worst of all, a black tie dinner in the evening.
Oh, yeah. Did you feel like that when you saw 9:30 podcast this morning?
I thought to myself, I can't do this. I can't do it. And then I thought, wait a minute. You can't do it if you think of it as work. Yeah. If you think of it as something that is a drudgery. If you think of it as something you have to get through. But I asked for this position. I told the people I was going to work at their interests and that I liked them, right? So I better get over it, because this is what I have chosen to do. And I changed my mindset. Literally, this is one of the few times in my life where I can point to the moment. I said, I'm going to enjoy every one of these events, and especially the black tie dinner, because I'm going to sit with somebody and I'm going to talk to them about what they want in their life and try to figure out how it advances my knowledge of how to do my job better. And that's the approach I took to every event after that, and it changed my life because I figured out everybody has something interesting to say. And I spend my time at a dinner mostly asking people questions, but they're questions designed to understand, how does the world work? If you grew up in Kingsville, what was life in Kingsville? If you grew up on the border, what was life like on the border? If you grew up in an oil field, what was life like in the oil field? Because I'm going to need all that knowledge. Right? And it gives me perspective to play. And then you're acting sincerely in people's interest, right? And that's the advice I would give somebody who wants to be in politics. Figure out a way to really love people's stories so you can help them in a meaningful way. And it's not just about the traditional ladder of climbing politics, work for a politician, be in his office, do campaigns, etc. Figure out, first of all, whether that's really the life you want, and whether you're cut out for trying to help people make the world better.
So just to recap what you were saying, I think a lot of us already understand and know this, that the motivation, the determination, your success it comes from inside of you. It is not external. It is internal, but it's an important thing to hear still. Again, it's internal. It's you. It's not anybody else around you. It's not going to happen to you. It's you.
Yeah, I think that, and the corollary, the flip side of that is, if it doesn't go the way you want at 40 years old, don't blame somebody else. Yes. Because the decisions you made when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, that shaped it.
Yes.
Yeah.
The habits you learned, the commitments you made, the self-knowledge you developed, the discipline you brought, you have to teach yourself all of that.
Yeah, I really, really, really want to thank you for having taken the time, because I know that you get paid to speak. You they call you and you've written books, you've done so many things. So just you taking the time to come here, be with my daughter and I love it, because it's 3 generations being represented here. And
Don't remind me.
2.5 generations. But I think if anything that kids can take away from this is, if you make it, give back. That's what I've gotten from your life is you've made it from many perspectives, but you've always given back. And I think part of why we're doing this podcast is because we want to give back, right? And so bring people up with you. Yeah. Don't leave them behind. Don't push them down. Bring them with you.
When you walk into that room, don't close the door behind you.
I believe in the progress of this country. And I believe in the progress of the Latino population of America. And I believe those things are totally intertwined. We are part of the saving grace of the future of America that is getting older and tireder in some of its values and not sure about it wants to go. And here comes this group of people, 50 million strong, 60 million strong now, 100 million strong in about 2040, right? Who are ambitious, energetic, who see a future. So let's get ourselves prepared because we're going to be a big positive force.
Yes.
In the future of this country. That's what drives me and motivates me. I love that story.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you so much, Mr. Cisneros. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more content, please like and subscribe and follow us on all social media platforms at Latinx Mentor.